I have to vociferously, vehemently and vigorously disagree with everything that was said in the last few minutes by both the panelists. One, if somebody is being targeted on the basis of religion, to actually say that let us actually turn a blind eye to the motivations behind that particular persecution is to insult that particular person who is already at the receiving end of the rough end of the stick. That's point number one.
Like Deepak pointed out, there's also a political message in all of this. Let's not forget that aspect and that angle too. Since we're talking about political messages, let's not forget, Sandeep, that this bill is likely to be taken up very soon, in the next few days, in fact.
Yes.
What kind of a backlash or what kind of a mood can we see in Parliament when this bill is taken up?
Well, I think the very interesting, a very interesting point would be how the Congress party reacts. The Congress, on this issue, for example, the Congress itself is divided in Assam. In Assam, you have Brahmaputra Valley and Barak Valley. So Barak Valley is predominantly Bengali-speaking population, and they welcome this because you have large number of people, large number of families who are actually without a proper status, once they have this law and by which they apply and get proper status, they would welcome. And in fact, if I am not mistaken, at one point of time, the Tarun Gogoi government had passed a resolution in the Assam Assembly to take it up with the centre, then UPA, to accord status of citizens to these people who had come and settled down. These are Bengali Hindus and people from Bangladesh and East Pakistan who had settled down in Barak Valley. So you had one section of the party who were in favor of it, the other section saying that not at all, because they go back to the same theory that, for example, the distinguishing feature between India and Pakistan is that while Pakistan accepted, they went by religion being the criteria for citizenship, we accepted secularism or secular, the idea of a secular nationhood where virtually anybody of any religious denomination could come and settle down. So that idea is being changed. Perhaps that is what Mr. Sen mentioned, that, if you want to, without changing the idea of the grand idea of the constitution, could you have tweaked the rules of how you apply citizenship to benefit certain communities who have been, after all, it's also a case of humanitarian rights of people who have been here for decades and decades and still being considered as stateless. Okay. So that aspect is also there. I mean, you cannot just wish away that lakhs of people are there without any status. Sure. They are virtually non-entities,
Okay. Yeah.
So that bit is there, but could we have done it in a way, not to challenge the very idea that only a particular community or a community of a particular following particular religion will be welcomed and others will be shunned. I think that is something that perhaps could be relooked. Okay, we should have been more accommodative is what you're suggesting. All right, Deepak, do respond to that. And also another question that I have, what does the constitution say?
That's exactly what I was coming to.
About all of this. Yeah.
So, in fact, I have to vociferously, vehemently and vigorously disagree with everything that was said in the last few minutes by both the panelists. One, if somebody is being targeted on the basis of religion, to actually say that let us actually turn a blind eye to the motivations behind that particular persecution is to insult that particular person who is already at the receiving end of the rough end of the stick. That's point number one. Point number two, assuming that you had actually made a change to the Citizenship Act en masse and then introduced a religious element into it, that would have been deeply problematic. However, if you have actually limited the scope of this particular exercise to 3 specific countries which have a specific religious identity by virtue of their constitutions, and there is a religious minority in that particular community that is being targeted because of its religion, which is precisely why you need an amendment which is specific to that particular area, so to speak, and therefore you're trying to address that particular audience. Had you actually undertaken changes on the basis of religion under the Citizenship Act, that would have been deeply problematic and that would have opened it up to a lot more constitutional challenges. Point number 2. This argument of Article 14, which has been constantly touted and that's been used against this particular bill. Frankly speaking, then I think we have misunderstood the very concept of Articles 5 to 11 under the Constitution and what it actually stands for. Existing citizens and citizens under Articles 5 to 11 cannot be discriminated against on the basis of their religion in the eyes of the law. But vestation of citizenship is different from existing citizens, okay? Which means when somebody chooses to enter this particular country, you have a right to actually impose certain conditions. Assuming for a moment, I'm taking the worst case possible. If this particular bill had said, the Christians in Pakistan, when they enter this country, they have to embrace Hinduism and they have to convert to Hinduism, that would have been problematic. Instead, the bill says, you come as a Christian, but you happen to be a minority in that particular country and you're being targeted for the particular faith. In fact, you should take up the history of why Hindus converted to Christianity during the riots in 1947. Most of these people converted because they wanted help from other communities so that they could be protected as long as they were in Pakistan, because they couldn't leave that particular place. They've lived there for generations together. Okay, this is the history of it. Therefore, this argument of Article 14 coming in the way of the citizenship bill, I think, frankly speaking, that does not hold water at all. Any number of judgments clearly say that when it comes to vestation of the status of a refugee, and then when an outsider, so to speak, technically enters this country, the country has the right to apply its discretionary filters in terms of granting both the status of refugeeship as well as citizenship. That much I think I'm very, very clear about. 3, every country as a sovereign state, whether it's a civilizational state or a nation state, has the right to apply its security considerations before it applies the principles of non-refoulement. In fact, as part of the discussion, we should even ask, then what happens to Rohingyas? Right? That's a question that you have to ask. There is a security clearance which has already raised a red flag. Now, Bangladesh is saying that they're an internal security threat. All these days, when India was actually saying it, the dispensation, because it happens to be a certain dispensation, it was branded a fascist concern. It was branded a bigoted concern. Now, neighboring countries are also making the same statement, so to speak. And effectively, Bangladesh is an Islamic republic. They have a problem with Rohingyas. So, I think we need to be very clear about the facts. We can get wishy-washy and muddle everything. However, let's speak. What are the facts? What is the constitutional issue? Facts are that the scope of this particular bill is limited to 3 countries which have a specific Islamic character. Okay. Right? Point number 2. Therefore, when they choose to enter this particular country, you're applying a certain filter of persecution on the basis of religion. You cannot take away that aspect from the calculus altogether, because if you do so, you're not allowing the person who's suffering the particular persecution to tell you the cause of the particular persecution. Right. I don't think that should be allowed. Okay.